Welcome to the Quantanix YouTube channel. This is Time Travel Podcast, Episode 4. You sent over some really fascinating material this week, getting right into the classic problem of time travel paradoxes, specifically that whole grandfather paradox idea, the logical knot we get tied up in when we think about changing our own past.
Yeah, and it's a great place to start today's exploration, actually, because we're not just going to rehash the paradoxes themselves. Instead, we want to unpack a really compelling idea, one that offers a potential way out, a way for time travel to maybe exist without those contradictions ripping reality apart.
You mean the Novikov Self-Consistency Principle?
Exactly that.
Right. Developed mid-'80s, I think, by the Russian physicist Igor Novikov.
That's the one.
And this principle suggests, well, that time travel is possible precisely because paradoxes aren't. Is that the gist?
That's the core idea. It's like a fundamental rule baked into space-time itself, ensuring the timeline stays consistent.
Okay, so our mission today, really, is to get our heads around this pretty complex concept and, well, its seriously mind-bending implications.
Right. The principle basically says space-time is structured,
right.
So attempts to change the past just don't work.
Not because of some outside force?
No, not like a time cop or anything. It's inherent self-consistency, built right into reality.
Okay, so where did such a, radical idea actually come from? It sounds very sci-fi. But the sources, they point to real physics.
Right? Absolutely. It emerged from digging into Einstein's theory of general relativity. See, certain solutions to his equations allow for something called closed time-like curves, or CTCs.
CTCs.
Think of it like a loop on a map, but in time. You travel forward, follow the loop, and end up back when you started.
Wow, okay.
And Novikov, even in his earlier books, started thinking, well, if these loops exist, maybe only journeys through them that are self-consistent are actually physically possible.
Closed time-like curves. Loops in space-time. It's still a wild concept. And this idea really picked up steam with a specific paper.
He has a really pivotal one in 1990, Cauchy problem in space-times with closed time-like curves.
Yeah.
Novikov worked with some big names on that. Kip Thorne, Mike Morris, Uwe Yurtsever.
Thorne and Morris, known for their wormhole work.
Exactly. And that paper brought some serious mathematical rigor to the table, looking at time travel possibilities, especially via wormholes, and showing the math didn't outright forbid it, but it did suggest constraints.
Okay, so what's the central rule, the key takeaway from Novikov that came out of this?
The absolute core is this. If an event would create a paradox, or change the past in a contradictory way, then the probability of that specific event happening is zero.
Zero. Just impossible.
Mathematically, yes. The universe at this fundamental level seems wired to avoid inconsistencies, not through conscious intervention, but just through the probabilities of how events unfold in spacetime.
Okay, let's loop back to the grandfather paradox then. If I built a time machine, went back intending to, prevent my own birth, what does Novikov say happens? My machine breaks down, I slip on a conveniently placed banana peel.
Basically, yes. Those kinds of things. The gun jams, you suddenly forget where grandpa lives, a tree falls in your path.
Something mundane prevents the paradox.
Exactly. Some seemingly random event or series of events conspires to stop the paradoxical outcome. The timeline stays consistent, not because you were actively stopped by an external force, but because the probabilities just favored a non-paradoxical outcome all along.
That is strangely elegant in a way. The universe just having this built-in aversion to paradoxes. So if I can't change the past, what can I do if I go back? What kind of interactions are allowed?
Well, this brings us to the idea of causal loops, sometimes called predestination paradoxes.
Predestination. Okay.
In this scenario, a time traveler actually becomes part of the past they intended to observe or influence.
Sure.
Instead of changing history, they fulfill a role that was always part of that history.
So it's less about making my mark and more about realizing, oh, I was already part of this story. I just didn't know it from my end.
Precisely. Think about the classic example, maybe, of a time traveler going back to find out who wrote a famous anonymous play. They can't find the author, so they copy down the play from memory, leave it for a publisher, and come back to the future. But then, maybe that copy they left behind is the original source everyone knows. The information loop closes.
Whoa. So there's no actual origin point for the play in that loop?
In that theoretical loop, no. The information just exists self-consistently. It's another real mind bender.
It really is. And these loops, they're possible because of those CTCs, the closed time-like curves.
Yes, exactly. The theoretical possibility of CTCs and certain solutions to Einstein's field equations is what gives us the framework for these kinds of self-intersecting paths in time. These aren't typical space-time geometries, mind you. Things like the Gödel metric or scenarios with, say, rotating cosmic strings. Very exotic stuff.
And this is where things get tricky for physics, right? Something about the Cauchy problem.
That's right. The Cauchy problem is basically asking, can we predict the future state of a system if we know its initial conditions perfectly?
Usually, yes, in classical physics anyway.
Right. But in spacetimes with CTCs, it gets complicated. Information can loop back from the future, potentially influencing the past or present within the loop. It creates self-referential situations.
So prediction breaks down.
Not necessarily. That 1990 paper was key because it showed mathematically that even with CTCs, you could still find consistent solutions to the fundamental physics equations.
Ah, so the math holds up, even with loops.
The math can hold up, yes. It suggests that consistent timelines are mathematically possible, even required, within these theoretical frameworks. It has implications for quantum mechanics, too, suggesting quantum systems might sort of naturally evolve to eliminate inconsistencies.
Okay, the physics seems surprisingly okay with this, in theory. But this raises massive philosophical questions, like free will. If the past can't be changed, does that mean our future is locked in too?
That is absolutely the central philosophical debate here. If your actions, even if you time travel, are constrained by this need for consistency, it does strongly suggest a deterministic universe. Some argue that if Novikov holds, our feeling of having genuine free choice might just be, well, an illusion.
Is that the only interpretation, though? Is there zero room for choice?
Well, there's a counter-argument. Some propose the principle doesn't mean everything is rigidly fixed. Instead, maybe just means our range of possible actions is constrained by the consistency requirement.
How so?
Think of it like trying to walk through a wall. Physical laws prevent you. Maybe the Novikov principle is like a fundamental constraint. You still make choices, but the outcomes of those choices must fit into the existing consistent space-time structure.
So, choices within boundaries. Like navigating a river, I can steer the boat a bit, but the riverbanks limit where I ultimately go.
That's a good analogy. Yeah, you have agency, but within the unchangeable landscape of the consistent timeline.
Interesting. And this whole idea of a fixed, consistent timeline, past, present, future, all existing. That really sounds like the block universe theory of time.
It lines up very, very closely, yes. The block universe view says all moments in time are equally real, existing like slices in a 4D block. Time travel, in this view and under Novikov, isn't changing a flowing river. It's just moving around within this already existing solid block of space-time.
Okay, this is getting deep. Are there any maybe fictional examples that really nail this Novikov idea, make it easier to picture?
Oh, absolutely. A really great one is the time turner in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban.
Ah, yes, I remember that.
When Harry and Hermione use it, they don't actually change anything that happened. They become the reason things happened the way they did. Remember Harry seeing himself cast the Patronus across the lake?
Right. He thought it was his dad, but it was his future self.
Exactly. He travels back, and then he performs the action he already witnessed. Their journey wasn't about altering events. It was about fulfilling the roles they had already played in those events.
That's a perfect illustration. Fulfilling the past, not changing it. So different from, say, Back to the Future.
Totally different. Back to the Future, or Terminator, for that matter. They mostly use the multiple timelines model. Changing the past splits off a new reality.
Like pruning branches on a tree?
Sort of, yeah. Novikov's principle insists on just one trunk, one single, self-consistent timeline. No branches allowed.
Okay. So it's an elegant idea, mathematically sound in certain contexts, but are there criticisms, limitations, people who push back?
Oh, definitely. It's not universally accepted by any means. Some physicists argue it feels a bit ad hoc, like it's just a rule invented specifically to avoid paradoxes rather than emerging naturally from deeper principles.
It doesn't explain the how. Like, how does the universe enforce this consistency?
Exactly. What's the mechanism? Does the gun really jam because of some cosmic consistency law? It can feel like assuming the conclusion paradoxes don't happen, therefore there must be a principle preventing them.
Yeah, that idea of top-down causation, the overall consistency dictating local events, it feels kind of backward to how we usually think physics works, from cause to effect.
It does feel counterintuitive.
Yeah.
And then there are still big open questions about quantum mechanics. Does the inherent randomness or probability in quantum stuff maybe allow for multiple different consistent outcomes? Could there be wiggle room there?
So it's a neat potential solution to paradoxes, but it definitely doesn't tie everything up with a neat bow.
Not at all. It leaves plenty of questions. But the core idea remains compelling. The Novikov Self-Consistency Principle offers a framework where time travel could be possible, but only within a universe that demands consistency. It suggests the past isn't this malleable thing you can reshape, but rather something that, well, it already includes any potential time travelers within its story.
It really does force you to rethink cause and effect, doesn't it? Even if we never actually build a time machine. Just thinking about the principal challenges are basic assumptions about how time flows.
It absolutely does. If Novikov holds, it points to this incredibly deep interconnectedness between all moments in time. A self-consistent tapestry, and maybe our linear view is just seeing one thread at a time.
A fascinating and slightly unsettling thought to end on. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time. Be sure to like, subscribe, and tune in next time for more adventures on the Time Travel Podcast at the Quantanix YouTube channel.